Hand over all company property and security will escort you out, Amanda Sterling screamed at me on her first day as CEO. I stood there in complete shock, unable to process what was happening. 20 years of building this company from nothing, and David's daughter was throwing me out like garbage. My hands trembled as I reached into my purse and pulled out the heavy ring of campus keys, sliding them across the polished conference table. The metallic scraping sound echoed through the silent boardroom. Thomas Wright, the lawyer sitting beside Amanda, stared at those keys like he had seen a ghost. His face drained of all color as he leaned over and whispered urgently in her ear. "Ma'am, about the board meeting, you fired her, and then she gave you these—" His voice cracked with obvious confusion and growing panic. "Let me take you back to the beginning, because nothing about this situation made sense unless you understood the real story. I founded Meridian Solutions in 2006 when I was 23 years old with my life savings of $15,000 and a small business loan that kept me awake at night worrying about payments. Those first months were brutal. I worked 16-hour days from my cramped studio apartment in downtown Seattle, cold calling potential clients, and teaching myself web development between contract negotiations. My furniture consisted of a folding table, one rickety chair, and a mattress on the floor beside towers of computer equipment. The breakthrough came in 2008 when I landed Microsoft as a client for their remote office setup project. The contract was worth $200,000, enough to rent proper office space and hire my first 3 employees. By 2010, we had grown to 20 people, and I needed a permanent headquarters. That's when I found the 6-story brick building on Pine Street. The previous owner was desperate to sell after the financial crisis, and I managed to secure it for $800,000 using the business as collateral. David Sterling entered my life in 2012 when Meridian Solutions was generating $4 million in annual revenue but needed capital to compete for larger contracts. He had connections in the venture capital world and 20 years of experience in corporate strategy. When he offered to become my business partner and co-owner in exchange for bringing in $2 million in funding, it seemed like the perfect solution. David was charming, sophisticated, and everything I felt I lacked in the boardroom. He wore expensive suits, spoke the language of investors, and had an MBA from Stanford that opened doors I could never reach alone. I trusted him completely. When he suggested we formalize our partnership by restructuring the company ownership, I signed whatever documents he put in front of me. When he recommended bringing in his daughter Amanda as a management trainee after she finished business school, I welcomed her with open arms. David assured me Amanda was brilliant-driven and would be an asset to our growing team. He painted a picture of a family business, one where his daughter could learn the industry while contributing fresh ideas and energy. But today, standing in that conference room while Amanda fired me from my own company, I realized how naive I had been. The way she spoke to me with such authority and disgust, like I was some incompetent employee holding the company back. The way David stood behind her with a satisfied smirk, never once intervening or showing any sign of the trust we had built over more than a decade. The way the security guards were already waiting outside the door, as if my termination had been planned down to the minute. The real shock came when I slid those campus keys across the table. Every key to every door in the building I had purchased with my own money and risk. Thomas Wright recognized them immediately because he was the attorney who handled the building purchase documentation. His face went pale because he knew something Amanda clearly did not know. Something David had apparently never bothered to mention to his daughter or anyone else on the board. I owned the building, not the company, not David, me. Scarlett Matthews, the 42-year-old woman they had just fired and humiliated, owned every square foot of the 6-story headquarters where Meridian Solutions operated. The building that housed our servers, our conference rooms, our executive offices, and the very boardroom where Amanda had just destroyed my career. David had been so focused on taking control of my company that he had forgotten about the most important asset of all. As I walked toward the elevator with security escorts flanking me like I was some kind of criminal, I caught a glimpse of Thomas Wright frantically whispering to Amanda while pointing at the keys. Her confident expression began to crack as the reality of the situation sank in. She had just fired the woman who could evict the entire company with 30 days' notice. The elevator doors closed and I descended 6 floors with my heart pounding and my mind racing. David Sterling had made the biggest mistake of his life. He had underestimated the woman who built everything from nothing at 23. And now, at 42, I was going to show him exactly what that mistake would cost him. My hands shook as I unlocked the door to my apartment that evening, my mind still reeling from the events in the boardroom. I had built Meridian Solutions from absolutely nothing, and in the span of 30 minutes, David and Amanda had stripped it all away from me. But as I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and started going through my files, I began to see a pattern that I had been too trusting to notice before. I pulled out the original incorporation documents from 2004, the ones I had filed myself at the Washington State Department of Licensing. My name was clearly listed as the sole founder and initial shareholder of Meridian Solutions, LLC. But when I compared them to the documents David had shown me during our partnership restructuring in 2010, something was very wrong. According to his paperwork, he was listed as co-founder with equal ownership from the company's inception. I called my accountant, Margaret Hendricks, who had been handling my books since the early days. Margaret, I need you to pull all the incorporation records for Meridian Solutions from 2004 onward, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Something is not adding up with the ownership structure. Margaret called me back within 2 hours with information that made my blood run cold. Scarlett. Someone filed amended incorporation documents in 2009, listing David Sterling as co-founder, she said carefully. But here is the strange part. The filing is backdated to 2003, a full year before you actually started the company. The signatures look authentic, but the dates make no sense. I felt sick to my stomach as the pieces started falling into place. David had been systematically rewriting the history of my company. He had filed fraudulent documents that made it appear he had been involved from the very beginning, even before the company existed. When I confronted him about the timeline discrepancy, Margaret's voice became even more concerned. There is something else, Scarlett. I found records of payments to a document preparation service in Portland that specializes in corporate restructuring. 3 payments of $5,000 each, all authorized by David Sterling's corporate credit card. The timing corresponds exactly with when these backdated incorporation papers were filed. My laptop screen glowed in the darkened apartment as I began searching through email archives and financial records. David had been meticulous in covering his tracks, but he could not erase everything. I found correspondence with investors where he introduced himself as the founder of Meridian Solutions, with me described as his operations manager, who had been promoted to partner. I found board meeting minutes where my contributions to company strategy were attributed to David's leadership and vision. The most damning evidence was a series of emails between David and Amanda from 6 months ago. Amanda had written to her father asking about the company's founding story for a presentation she was preparing for business school. David's response was a complete fabrication. He told her that he had founded Meridian Solutions in 2003 with an innovative business model and that I was an early employee who had shown promise and been gradually given more responsibility. Amanda believed every word. Her response email showed genuine admiration for her father's entrepreneurial journey and excitement about joining the family business after graduation. She had no idea that her father was lying about everything. She truly believed that she was the rightful heir to a company that David had built from scratch. But the smoking gun was buried in David's deleted emails, which I was able to recover using data recovery software. In a message to his attorney last month, David had written about the need to remove certain complications before Amanda's transition to CEO. The complications he was referring to were my ownership stake and my detailed knowledge of the company's actual history. He needed me gone before anyone started asking questions that might expose his fraudulent documentation. The lawyer who had gone pale in the boardroom, Thomas Wright, was not David's attorney at all. I recognized his name from the real estate transaction when I purchased the building in 2008. Thomas Wright was the building's lease attorney brought in to discuss property management contracts and tenant agreements. He had been expecting to meet with the building owner, which was me, not to witness David's daughter firing the very person he was supposed to be conducting business with. David had orchestrated the entire scene without considering this crucial detail. He had told Amanda to fire me immediately on her first day to establish authority and remove any potential obstacles to her leadership. But he had scheduled the property management meeting for the same day, creating a situation where his deception would be exposed in the most dramatic way possible. As I sat in my apartment that night, surrounded by evidence of David's betrayal, I realized that he had made a fatal error in his planning. He had been so focused on stealing my company that he had forgotten I still owned the building that housed it, the building that generated rental income, the building that could be sold or repurposed at the owner's discretion, the building that gave me leverage he had never considered. Thomas Wright's reaction to those keys was not confusion. It was recognition. He knew exactly who I was and what those keys represented. And now I knew exactly how I was going to fight back against David Sterling's elaborate fraud. The war for Meridian Solutions was just beginning, and I held the ultimate weapon he had forgotten existed. I could not sleep that night, so I drove back to the Pine Street building at 3 a.m. The security desk was staffed by Jake Morrison, a retired Seattle police officer who had been working there for 15 years. Jake had seen every phase of Meridian Solutions' growth from our early days with 3 employees to the current workforce of 60 people. He knew the real history of the company because he had lived through it alongside me. Jake, I need to ask you about something, and I need you to be completely honest with me, I said as I approached his desk. Have you noticed anything unusual happening in the building after hours? Any meetings or visitors that seemed out of place? Jake looked around carefully, then gestured for me to follow him to a small office behind the security desk. He pulled out a thick logbook and flipped through several pages of visitor records. Scarlett, I have been wanting to talk to someone about this for months, but I did not know who to trust, he said quietly. David Sterling has been holding meetings here every Friday night for the past 6 weeks, always after everyone else has gone home. He showed me the visitor log entries, and my heart started pounding as I read the names. Marcus Johnson, Chief Technology Officer at Phoenix Technologies. Patricia Walsh, Vice President of Acquisitions at Phoenix Technologies. Stephen Crawford, Legal Counsel for Phoenix Technologies. Phoenix was our biggest competitor, a company 3 times our size that had been trying to acquire smaller firms in our industry for the past 2 years. But that is not the strangest part. Jake continued, pulling out a manila folder from his desk drawer. I started documenting these meetings because something felt wrong about the secrecy. Look at these photos. The security camera footage showed David meeting with Phoenix executives in the main conference room, the same room where Amanda had fired me just hours earlier. But what shocked me was what they were doing. Briefcases were being opened and documents were being exchanged. David was photocopying files from our proprietary client database and handing them over to our competitors. In one particularly clear image, I could see David showing building blueprints to Marcus Johnson while pointing out specific areas of the facility. Jake leaned closer and lowered his voice even further. Here is the part that really bothered me, Scarlett. Amanda does not know about any of these meetings. I have seen her working late several times on Friday evenings, and David always makes sure she leaves before his visitors arrive. Last week, she tried to come back to the building around 9 p.m. to retrieve something from her office, and David physically intercepted her in the parking lot and convinced her to go home instead. The implications hit me like a physical blow. David was not just stealing my company to give to his daughter. He was planning to sell it immediately to Phoenix Technologies once Amanda had consolidated control and eliminated any obstacles to the transaction. Amanda was just as much a victim of his deception as I was. She had no idea that her father was using her as a puppet in an elaborate scheme to defraud the company and sell it to competitors. Jake opened another section of his documentation and showed me visitor logs from the previous month. Phoenix executives had toured the entire building, measuring office spaces and meeting with David about transition planning. They had discussed employee retention strategies and technology integration timelines. The sale was not a future possibility. It was an active negotiation that was approaching completion. The most disturbing revelation came when Jake showed me financial records that had been accidentally left behind after one of the Friday night meetings. David had prepared detailed financial projections showing Phoenix Technologies that Meridian Solutions would be worth $12 million after certain operational improvements and cost reductions. The cost reductions included eliminating my salary and equity stake, which David estimated would save the company $300,000 annually. But the smoking gun was a timeline document that outlined the entire acquisition plan. Phase 1 was Amanda's installation as CEO and the immediate removal of Scarlett Matthews to eliminate operational resistance. Phase 2 was the consolidation of client contracts and the transfer of proprietary technology to Phoenix Systems. Phase 3 was the formal acquisition announcement and the integration of Meridian Solutions into Phoenix Technologies as a subsidiary division. According to the timeline, the acquisition was scheduled to be completed within 60 days of Amanda taking control. David had promised Phoenix executives that all potential legal challenges would be resolved before the transaction, which explained why he needed me fired immediately. He could not afford to have me asking questions or demanding access to company records during the sale process. Jake handed me copies of all his documentation along with USB drives containing the security footage. Scarlett, I have been working in law enforcement and corporate security for 30 years, and this is one of the most sophisticated fraud schemes I have ever encountered, he said grimly. David Sterling has been planning this for at least 6 months, maybe longer. He has been systematically positioning himself to steal and sell your company while making his own daughter complicit in the theft. As I drove home with Jake's evidence, I realized that David's plan was actually brilliant in its ruthlessness. Amanda genuinely believed she was inheriting a family business that her father had built through hard work and innovation. She had no idea that she was being used as a front for corporate theft and fraud. When the Phoenix acquisition was announced, she would probably be given a token executive position while David collected millions of dollars from the sale of assets that were never legitimately his to sell. But David had made one crucial miscalculation in his elaborate scheme. He had assumed that firing me would eliminate the biggest threat to his plans. What he failed to consider was that I still owned the building where his entire fraud was taking place. The building where Phoenix executives had been conducting their due diligence. The building that housed all the technology and infrastructure that made Meridian Solutions valuable to potential buyers. Without the building, there was no company. Without the building lease, Phoenix Technologies would have no interest in acquiring a business with no permanent headquarters and no guaranteed access to its operational facilities. David had been so focused on stealing the corporate entity that he had forgotten about the physical foundation that made everything possible. Tomorrow, I would start making phone calls that would bring his carefully constructed house of lies crashing down around him. But tonight, I finally understood the full scope of what I was fighting against, and I knew exactly how to win. The next morning, I called my old friend Sarah Chen from Morrison Kemp Accounting, the firm that had handled our books before David convinced me to switch to a larger corporate accounting service. Sarah had always been suspicious of David's financial management style, and she had maintained copies of our original financial records from the early days of Meridian Solutions. "Sarah, I need your help with something urgent," I said when she answered her phone. "I think David Sterling has been embezzling money from client accounts, and I need someone I trust to help me investigate." Sarah agreed to meet me at her office that afternoon, and what she discovered in our old financial records was even worse than I had imagined. David had been skimming money from client payments for the past 2 years using a sophisticated system of delayed deposits and redirected funds. When clients paid their invoices, David would deposit the money into temporary accounts that he controlled, then transfer partial amounts to the company's main operating account while keeping the difference for himself. The embezzlement pattern was carefully designed to avoid detection. David would delay vendor payments to cover the missing client funds, creating a rotating cycle of cash flow manipulation that kept the books balanced on the surface while systematically draining money from the company. Sarah estimated that he had stolen over $400,000 during the past 24 months. But the most shocking discovery came when Sarah decided to verify Amanda's educational credentials for the background check that should have been conducted before her promotion to CEO. Sarah had contacts at Northwestern University's business school, where Amanda claimed to have earned her MBA with honors in corporate strategy and organizational leadership. "Scarlett, you need to sit down for this," Sarah said as she hung up the phone after speaking with the registrar's office. Northwestern University has no record of Amanda Sterling ever attending their business school. She never applied, never enrolled, and never graduated. Her entire MBA credential is completely fabricated. I felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet as Sarah continued her investigation. Amanda's resume listed 3 years of management experience at consulting firms in Chicago before joining Meridian Solutions. Sarah called each of the companies listed on Amanda's resume, and the results were devastating. None of the firms had any record of employing Amanda Sterling. 2 of the companies confirmed that the specific positions listed on her resume had never existed in their organizational structure. David had created an entirely fictional professional background for his daughter. The prestigious business school education, the consulting experience, the leadership training programs, all of it was completely made up. Amanda had been living a lie created by her father, probably believing that her credentials were legitimate and that she had earned her position through merit and hard work. Sarah pulled up client communication records that revealed another disturbing pattern. Several major clients had been questioning billing irregularities over the past 6 months. The Henderson Group had disputed charges for services they claimed were never provided. Cascade Manufacturing had complained about invoices that included consulting hours that exceeded the agreed-upon project scope. Morrison Industries had actually terminated their contract 3 weeks ago due to what they described as unethical billing practices. The client complaints were not random errors or misunderstandings. They were the direct result of David's embezzlement scheme. He had been inflating invoices and charging clients for fictitious services to cover the money he was stealing from their payments. Some clients had paid for consulting work that was never performed, while others had been billed for additional services that were actually covered under their existing contracts. Sarah called two of our biggest clients to verify the status of their accounts, and the conversations confirmed our worst fears. The Henderson Group was planning to request a full audit of their billing history and considering legal action for overcharges. Cascade Manufacturing had already engaged a forensic accountant to review 3 years of invoices for potential fraud. Both companies indicated that they had lost confidence in Meridian Solutions' financial integrity and were evaluating other consulting firms for future projects. The embezzlement was not just stealing money from the company, it was destroying our reputation with clients and threatening the long-term viability of the business. David's greed was systematically undermining everything I had spent 20 years building. He was not just planning to steal my company and sell it to Phoenix Technologies. He was looting it first, extracting as much personal profit as possible before handing over a damaged and diminished business to the buyers. But the most heartbreaking revelation was the impact on Amanda. Sarah found emails between Amanda and her father where she expressed concerns about client complaints and billing discrepancies. Amanda had noticed the problems and had tried to address them through proper channels, not knowing that her father was the source of the unethical practices she was trying to fix. Her emails showed genuine distress about the company's reputation and sincere efforts to improve client relationships. Amanda was not a willing participant in her father's crimes. She was another victim of his elaborate deception, manipulated and exploited just like everyone else. Her aggressive behavior during my termination was probably the result of David convincing her that I was responsible for the client complaints and financial irregularities. He had turned his own daughter into an unwitting accomplice by feeding her false information about my performance and character. Sarah compiled all of her findings into a comprehensive report that documented the embezzlement, the falsified credentials, and the client relationship damage. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. David Sterling was not just a fraud. He was a criminal who had been systematically looting the company while destroying its reputation and manipulating his own daughter into helping him cover up his crimes. As I reviewed Sarah's report that evening, I realized that David's plan was even more sinister than I had initially understood. He was not just stealing my company to give to Amanda or sell to Phoenix Technologies. He was destroying it from the inside while extracting maximum personal profit, then using Amanda as a scapegoat who would take responsibility for the financial damage when it was finally discovered. The Friday board meeting that Thomas Wright had mentioned was not just a formality to confirm Amanda's position as CEO. It was the final step in David's exit strategy, where he would transfer all legal responsibility for the company's problems to his daughter, while he disappeared with the stolen money and his share of the Phoenix acquisition proceeds. But David had made one crucial error in his planning. He had never considered that I would fight back with the one asset he could not steal or manipulate: the building that housed his entire criminal enterprise. The building that gave me the power to expose everything and bring his carefully constructed fraud scheme crashing down around him. The board meeting was scheduled for Friday at 9 a.m., giving me 3 days to prepare my counterstrike. I worked around the clock with Sarah and Jake to compile evidence and develop a strategy that would expose David's entire fraud operation in front of the board members Amanda and Thomas Wright. This meeting would be David's moment of triumph, where he expected to finalize Amanda's control and eliminate any remaining obstacles to his Phoenix Technologies sale. Instead, it would become the venue for his complete destruction. Sarah helped me organize the evidence into clear categories: embezzlement documentation, falsified incorporation papers, client complaint records, and proof of Amanda's fabricated credentials. Jake provided security footage of the secret Phoenix meetings, along with visitor logs and financial documents that had been left behind during the negotiations. I prepared copies of everything for each board member with detailed timelines that showed exactly how David had been systematically defrauding the company. But the breakthrough came when I contacted Thomas Wright directly and arranged a private meeting at his law office. Thomas was genuinely confused about the events in the boardroom and eager to understand why the building owner had been fired by someone who appeared to have no authority over property management matters. Thomas, I need you to understand something very important, I said as we sat in his conference room. David Sterling has been lying to everyone about the ownership structure of Meridian Solutions. He is not the founder of the company, and his daughter has no legitimate claim to the CEO position. Everything they told the board is based on fraudulent documentation. I showed Thomas the original incorporation papers from 2004, along with the bank records that proved I had purchased the building with my own money and business loans. I explained how David had filed backdated paperwork to make himself appear as co-founder, and how he had been embezzling client funds while planning to sell the company to Phoenix Technologies without the knowledge or consent of the board. Thomas examined the documentation carefully, his expression growing more serious with each piece of evidence. "Scarlett, this is far worse than I initially realized," he said finally. "David Sterling has committed multiple felonies, and he has been using his daughter as an unwitting accomplice. The board has been making decisions based on completely false information about company ownership and financial status." But Thomas revealed something that changed everything about my understanding of the situation. The board meeting on Friday was not just a formality to confirm Amanda's position. David had told the board members that significant changes were needed to address financial irregularities that he claimed I had been responsible for as operations manager. He had scheduled the meeting to present evidence of my supposed mismanagement and to justify not only my termination, but also potential legal action against me for damages. David's plan was even more diabolical than I had imagined. He was going to use the board meeting to formally accuse me of embezzlement and client fraud, using the very crimes he had committed as evidence against me. He would present Amanda as the solution to the company's problems, a fresh leader with the credentials and integrity needed to restore client confidence and financial stability. The board would vote to support Amanda's leadership and authorize legal action against me to recover the allegedly stolen funds. Thomas also revealed that David had been in communication with the board members individually over the past month, preparing them for the dramatic revelations about my supposed criminal activity. He had shown them selected financial records that appeared to document embezzlement carefully edited to remove any evidence of his own involvement. Several board members had already expressed support for aggressive legal action to protect the company's interests. The most shocking revelation was that David had actually prepared formal criminal charges against me, working with a prosecutor who believed his fabricated evidence. The charges included embezzlement fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. David had planned to have me arrested during or immediately after the board meeting, eliminating any possibility that I could defend myself or present counter-evidence. But Thomas also provided me with crucial information about the legal vulnerabilities in David's scheme. As the building owner, I had rights and protections that he had never considered. The lease agreement between Meridian Solutions and my property management company required board approval for any major personnel changes that might affect the company's ability to meet its rental obligations. David's unilateral decision to fire me without board consultation was actually a violation of the lease terms. More importantly, Thomas revealed that Phoenix Technologies had been conducting due diligence based on false information about building ownership and lease terms. David had told them that the company owned the building outright, which was a key factor in their valuation of the acquisition target. When Phoenix discovered that the building was actually owned by someone they had no relationship with, and that the owner had been illegally terminated by someone with no authority to make such decisions, they would likely withdraw from the acquisition immediately. Thomas agreed to attend the board meeting as my legal representative, armed with evidence of David's crimes and documentation of my legitimate ownership rights. He prepared legal notices that would be served on David and Amanda during the meeting, formally accusing David of fraud and embezzlement, while demanding the immediate restoration of my position and authority. We also contacted the Seattle Police Department's white-collar crime unit to report David's embezzlement and document forgery. Detective Maria Rodriguez agreed to attend the board meeting as an observer ready to arrest David if the evidence warranted immediate action. The prosecutor who had been working with David on charges against me was also notified about the fraudulent nature of his allegations, effectively ending any possibility of legal action against me. Thursday night, I reviewed my presentation one final time, making sure every detail was accurate and every accusation was supported by solid evidence. The emotional toll of the past week had been exhausting, but I felt a sense of clarity and determination that I had not experienced in years. David Sterling had underestimated the woman he was trying to destroy, and tomorrow he would learn exactly what that mistake would cost him. The building that he had forgotten I owned would become the venue for his public humiliation and downfall. The daughter he had manipulated and deceived would finally learn the truth about her father's character. The board he had lied to would see the full scope of his criminal behavior, and the company I had built from nothing would finally be free from his corruption and greed. Friday morning could not come soon enough. Friday morning arrived with typical Seattle drizzle, but I felt more focused and determined than I had in years. I arrived at my own building 30 minutes before the scheduled board meeting, carrying boxes of evidence, and accompanied by Thomas Wright Sarah Chen and Detective Maria Rodriguez. Jake Morrison had agreed to provide security and witness testimony if needed. We were ready for war. The boardroom was already occupied when we arrived. All 6 board members were present: Patricia Williams, the retired CEO of Northwest Banking; Robert Kim, founder of Cascade Venture Capital; Linda Davis, former Chief Technology Officer at Amazon; Michael Johnson, independent business consultant; Jennifer Wilson, corporate attorney from Williams Smith Partners; and David Chang, accounting specialist from Chang Associates. David Sterling sat at the head of the table with Amanda beside him, both of them reviewing presentation materials that I assumed contained their fabricated evidence against me. Amanda looked up in shock when I entered the room with my team. "What is she doing here?" she demanded, pointing at me with obvious anger. "Security was supposed to ensure she never entered this building again. I am here because this is my building, and I have every right to attend any meeting that concerns my company," I replied calmly, taking a seat across from David. "Thomas Wright is representing me as legal counsel, and Detective Rodriguez is here to investigate criminal allegations that have come to light." David's face went pale, but he tried to maintain his composure. "Scarlett, you are not welcome here, and you have no standing to disrupt this important board meeting," he said firmly. "We are here to address serious financial irregularities that occurred under your management, and your presence is inappropriate." "Actually, David, I think the board members deserve to know the truth about who has been committing financial crimes at this company," I replied, opening my first evidence folder. Thomas Wright stood up and began distributing documentation to each board member while I started my presentation. "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Scarlett Matthews, and I am the actual founder and majority shareholder of Meridian Solutions, as well as the owner of this building where we are currently meeting. Over the past week, I have uncovered evidence of systematic fraud, embezzlement, and document forgery committed by David Sterling. I am here today to present that evidence and to request your immediate action to protect this company from further criminal activity," Amanda interrupted angrily. This is absurd, she said, standing up from her chair. My father founded this company 20 years ago, and you are just a disgruntled employee who is trying to sabotage our leadership transition. Board members, I urge you not to listen to these desperate accusations. Patricia Williams, the former banking CEO, raised her hand to request silence while she examined the documents Thomas had distributed. After several minutes of careful review, she looked up with a grave expression. David, these incorporation papers show Scarlett Matthews as the sole founder of Meridian Solutions in 2004. Can you explain why our records show you as co-founder from 2003, a year before the company was actually established? David's confident demeanor began to crack as Sarah Chen stood up to present the financial evidence. Board members, I am a certified public accountant, and my firm handled Meridian Solutions books from 2004 to 2010. I have identified over $400,000 in embezzled funds that David Sterling has stolen from client payments over the past 2 years. He has been using a sophisticated system of delayed deposits and redirected payments to systematically loot this company. The room fell silent as board members reviewed the financial documentation. Robert Kim, the venture capitalist, looked directly at David with obvious disgust. David, these bank records clearly show unauthorized transfers to accounts under your personal control. This is not mismanagement. This is theft. But the most devastating moment came when Sarah presented evidence of Amanda's falsified credentials. Amanda, I am sorry to be the one to tell you this, but your father has been lying to you about your educational background and work experience, Sarah said gently. Northwestern University has no record of your attendance, and the consulting firms listed on your resume confirm that they never employed you. Your entire professional background has been fabricated. Amanda's face went white as she turned to stare at her father in complete shock. Daddy, what is she talking about? She whispered. You told me I graduated with honors. You showed me my diploma. You said those companies were giving you excellent references about my work. David tried desperately to regain control of the situation. These are all lies and fabrications designed to undermine our leadership transition, he said, but his voice was shaking. Scarlett Matthews is a bitter, vindictive woman who cannot accept that she has been replaced by more qualified leadership. That was when Jake Morrison entered the room carrying a laptop computer and a stack of printed photographs. Board members, I am head of security for this building, and I have documentation of David Sterling's secret meetings with executives from Phoenix Technologies, Jake announced. For the past 6 weeks, Mr. Sterling has been conducting after-hours negotiations to sell this company to our biggest competitor without the knowledge or consent of the board or his own daughter. Jake connected his laptop to the boardroom projector and began showing security footage of David's Friday night meetings with Phoenix executives. The images were crystal clear, David handing over proprietary client information, photocopying confidential documents, and discussing building blueprints with competitor representatives. The timestamps showed that these meetings had been occurring regularly for over a month, always when Amanda and other employees were not in the building. Amanda watched the footage with growing horror, finally understanding the full scope of her father's deception. You have been planning to sell the company behind my back, she said quietly, tears starting to form in her eyes. You made me fire Scarlett so that there would be no obstacles to your secret deal with Phoenix. You used me as a puppet in your fraud scheme. David made one last desperate attempt to save himself. Amanda, do not listen to these lies, he pleaded. I was only exploring options to secure the company's future. Everything I have done has been to protect your inheritance and ensure your success as CEO. But Amanda had heard enough. She stood up from her chair and faced the board members with as much dignity as she could muster. Board members, I formally resign from my position as CEO, effective immediately, she said clearly. I had no knowledge of my father's criminal activities, and I deeply apologize for my role in this fraud, even though it was unwitting. Scarlett Matthews is the legitimate founder and owner of this company, and she deserves to have her position restored. Detective Rodriguez stepped forward and addressed David directly. Mr. Sterling, based on the evidence presented here today, you are under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and document forgery. You have the right to remain silent, and you have the right to an attorney. As handcuffs clicked around David's wrists, Patricia Williams called for an emergency board vote. All in favor of immediately restoring Scarlett Matthews as Chief Executive Officer of Meridian Solutions, she said firmly. The vote was unanimous. David Sterling was escorted from the boardroom in handcuffs, his elaborate fraud scheme completely exposed, and his criminal activity documented beyond any reasonable doubt. Amanda sat quietly in her chair, still processing the magnitude of her father's betrayal and her own unwitting participation in his crimes. The war for Meridian Solutions was over, and justice had finally been served. But the real work of rebuilding trust and repairing the damage would start immediately. 6 months after that dramatic board meeting, I stood in my office looking out at the Seattle skyline, reflecting on everything that had happened and everything we had accomplished since David's arrest. The healing process had been challenging, but Meridian Solutions was stronger than ever. And I had learned valuable lessons about trust leadership and the importance of staying vigilant against those who would exploit your generosity. David Sterling had been sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for embezzlement, fraud, and racketeering. The judge had been particularly harsh in her sentencing, noting that David's crimes had not only damaged the company, but had also psychologically manipulated his own daughter into unwitting participation. The $400,000 he had stolen was recovered through asset forfeiture, including his house, his car, and his investment portfolio. Every penny was returned to Meridian Solutions and used to strengthen our financial foundation. Phoenix Technologies had withdrawn their acquisition offer immediately after learning about the fraud and the building ownership complications. Their executives were furious about the false information David had provided during due diligence, and they issued a public statement distancing themselves from any association with his criminal activities. The attempted acquisition actually strengthened our market position as several competitors realized that Meridian Solutions must be extremely valuable if Phoenix had been willing to pay $12 million for it. The most rewarding part of the recovery process had been working with Amanda to rebuild her life and career. After resigning from the CEO position, Amanda had initially wanted to disappear, completely overwhelmed by shame and embarrassment about her father's crimes. But I convinced her to stay and fight for her own redemption. She enrolled in a legitimate MBA program at the University of Washington while working part-time at Meridian Solutions in an entry-level business analyst position. Amanda threw herself into her studies and her work with incredible determination. She wanted to prove that she could succeed based on her own merit, without false credentials or family connections. Her colleagues gradually came to respect her intelligence, work ethic, and genuine commitment to learning the business from the ground up. She never asked for special treatment or tried to trade on her previous position. She earned every promotion and recognition through hard work and demonstrated competence. The company had grown dramatically once clients learned about our commitment to transparency and ethical business practices. The Henderson Group not only renewed their contract, but increased their engagement by 300%. Cascade Manufacturing returned as a client and brought 2 of their subsidiary companies with them. Morrison Industries signed a 5-year exclusive consulting agreement that was the largest contract in our company's history. Our reputation for integrity became our greatest competitive advantage. I promoted Jake Morrison to Chief of Security and Operations with an equity stake that reflected his crucial role in exposing David's crimes. Jake implemented comprehensive security protocols and financial oversight systems that would prevent any future fraud attempts. His law enforcement background made him invaluable in developing policies that protected both the company and our employees from internal and external threats. Thomas Wright helped us establish a proper corporate governance structure that clearly defined ownership rights and decision-making authority. We created an independent board of directors with no family relationships or personal conflicts of interest. Every board member underwent thorough background checks and signed detailed ethical conduct agreements. The new corporate structure eliminated any ambiguity about ownership and ensured that no single person could manipulate the company for personal gain. Sarah Chen's accounting firm was retained as our permanent financial oversight partner with monthly audits and quarterly reports to the board of directors. Every client payment was tracked through multiple verification systems, and all vendor relationships were subject to competitive bidding processes. The financial transparency measures we implemented became a model that other companies in our industry began adopting. The building that had been the key to exposing David's fraud became a symbol of our company's values and permanence. I expanded our headquarters to occupy all 6 floors, creating space for innovation labs, client conference centers, and employee wellness facilities. The main conference room where Amanda had fired me was renamed the Transparency Suite with glass walls and open access policies that encouraged honest communication and collaborative decision-making. Amanda graduated from her MBA program with highest honors and accepted a promotion to Director of Client Relations, a position she had earned through exceptional performance and demonstrated leadership. She had rebuilt her professional reputation through integrity and hard work, proving that she was nothing like her father. Her colleagues respected her, not despite her past association with David's crimes, but because of how she had responded to that betrayal with courage and determination. The most gratifying moment came when Amanda approached me on the anniversary of David's arrest to thank me for giving her a second chance. "Scarlett, you could have destroyed my career and my reputation when you exposed my father's crimes," she said with obvious emotion. "Instead, you helped me rebuild my life based on truth and merit. I will spend the rest of my career trying to live up to the integrity and leadership you have shown me." Meridian Solutions now employed over 100 people and generated $15 million in annual revenue. We had become the most respected consulting firm in the Pacific Northwest, known for our technical expertise, ethical standards, and commitment to client success. The company that David had tried to steal and destroy was more successful than ever, built on a foundation of transparency and trust that no amount of fraud could undermine. As I prepared to leave the office that evening, I walked through each floor of the building, greeting employees and observing the bustling activity of a thriving business. The conference rooms were filled with productive meetings. The innovation labs were buzzing with creative energy, and the client service areas were alive with the sounds of successful partnerships being built and maintained. David Sterling had taught me that trust must be earned and verified, not simply given. He had shown me the importance of maintaining control over the assets and systems that make a business possible. Most importantly, he had demonstrated that integrity and transparency are not just moral choices, but practical necessities for long-term success. The keys that had exposed his fraud were still in my desk drawer, a reminder that real ownership cannot be stolen through paperwork or manipulation. The building that housed our dreams and ambitions belonged to the person who had the vision to create it and the courage to protect it. No amount of lies or fraud could change that fundamental truth. Standing in my office that night, looking out at the city lights reflecting off Elliott Bay, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction and peace. The company I had built from nothing had survived the ultimate test of betrayal and emerged stronger than ever. The employees who depended on us for their livelihoods were secure and prosperous. The clients who trusted us with their business challenges knew they were working with people of integrity and competence. David Sterling had tried to steal my life's work, but he had actually given me something more valuable than anything he could have taken away. He had forced me to examine every aspect of my business, strengthen every weak point, and build systems that could withstand any future challenges. The fraud that was meant to destroy me had actually made me a better leader and made Meridian Solutions a better company. The woman who had been fired from her own company 6 months ago was now the CEO of the most successful and respected firm in our industry. The building that David had forgotten I owned had become the foundation for achievements he could never have imagined. The daughter he had manipulated and deceived had become one of our most valuable employees and a leader in her own right. Justice had been served, lessons had been learned, and the future was brighter than ever. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from avoiding betrayal, but from having the courage and determination to fight back when betrayal occurs. David Sterling had underestimated the woman he tried to destroy, and that mistake had cost him everything while giving me the opportunity to build something even better than what I had before. Have you ever faced a situation where someone tried to take credit for your hard work or achievements? How did you handle it, and what did you learn from the experience? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and share it with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the importance of standing up for yourself and fighting for what is rightfully yours. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about overcoming betrayal and building success through integrity and determination. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to protect what you have built and the wisdom to trust carefully but completely when you find people worthy of that trust.